I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Intellectual Podcast. If you're new to the show, welcome. I'm your host, David S. Dawson. I'm a filmmaker in San Diego, California, and I started The Intellectual 8 seasons ago because I love exploring the stories of how people who pursue creative endeavors get to where they are. The conversations in each episode are not interviews. We strive for a more casual chat with our guests, and we let the natural flow of conversation run its course as much as we can. This often leads us into surprising territory, not just for you and for me, but often the things we explore surprise even our guests. We often follow up our conversations with our guests on the Clubhouse app. So please join us on Clubhouse. You can visit our club page by visiting us online at intellectualchats.club. And if you need an invite to the app, be sure to check out our Instagram and Twitter accounts at The Intellectual regularly, as we post links to our discussions there with invite codes. If you enjoy this conversation, I hope that you'll subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player. We are easily found if you search The Intellectual Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Now, let's get on with this week's chat with another amazing creative.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The Intellectual Podcast starts now.
So the show is quite simply, we talk to creatives and we just talk about, you know, how you got to doing the things that you do within the various creative industries. And looking at your website, you've got a lot of creative stuff that you're doing, between producing and DJing and being a musician yourself, and then also being a comedy guy. You're like, we got lots to talk about with you. So
sure. Not to mention the traumatic childhood. You know, I'm a triple threat. Yeah.
Ooh, hey,
we love traumatic childhoods. So.
Yeah, of course. That's what interviews are made of. Yeah.
That's right.
If it wasn't for meeting Dave, my traumatic childhood could not have continued into my adulthood.
That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's a best friend for, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
do look forward to this. It's wonderful we're able to meet in this fashion. I do look forward to a time once we're all vaccinated, we can get together and in person hang out and stuff. That would be great.
Yeah, that'll be great, right?
Yeah.
Are you guys?
Everybody's going to be coming out like those. I'm sorry.
Are you guys both in Los Angeles as well?
Well, I'm in Orange County.
Yeah, okay. I'm in San Diego. Whitney's
Sure.
in San Diego as well. So
gotcha. Okay.
But she spends a lot of time up in LA auditioning and whatnot. So,
yeah,
you know, the actor life.
Indeed.
So
that was the one thing I didn't want to do when I came here. Was I'd done that early in life, and I was like, you know, acting is the one thing I don't need to do when I get to LA. So there you go.
So you're the exception to the norm.
Correct. When people contact me, people I know, I ended up doing so many on-camera things anyway. But when people contact me, they're working on a project and they want me for something like a documentary, whatever it is. I'll work with them on camera, but I'll not live the actor life. There's no need. Like I do. You saw I do all these other things. I don't want to go back to that. So yeah.
Well, the actor life is consumed with so much heartache and rejection. Like, why would you want to go there?
I'm already on dating apps, so I don't need to, connect those.
I got rid of all those because they were breaking my heart.
It's pretty rough. I mean, that's why I've maintained a therapist for so many years, probably just because of dating apps.
So, Russell, where are you originally from?
Originally from the Bronx, New York.
New York represent.
That's right. I was in the Bronx, which is why I can get away with chains from time to time. I was I was born at Albert Einstein Memorial Hospital, which some people would say that's a sign of greatness or smartness. It just was dumb luck. It was the closest cheap hospital to where my parents lived, in a tiny closet in the Bronx. So.
Yeah, everybody's just kind of packed in there, right?
Oh yeah.
My mom's from Coney Island. My dad's from the Bronx. So
wow, Coney Island.
Actually, Seagate.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I don't know too many people who are from Coney Island who aren't carnies or mermaids. So
no, I mean,
yeah,
Seagate.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
So I like this. Well, when I was growing up, I thought it was cool that they lived right near Coney Island.
Oh yeah.
But it's Seagate.
It makes for an interesting upbringing, being anywhere in the zone of Coney Island for sure.
Well, what was it like growing up in the Bronx?
I wouldn't know, because when I was a baby, they took me away. They got a house in New Jersey in the suburbs when I was very young. And so as a youngin', I was growing up in like central Jersey, which later became North Jersey. I moved up there. So I was in Matawan for some of my younger years, and which is kind of close to the shore. And then I was in Montclair and Bloomfield later on.
I'm sorry?
North Jersey. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. He's just deaf.
Oh,
no. You said you said Montclair, and I said I'm sorry.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah,
Steve's a Jersey boy, so
I like Montclair.
I'm from Livingston, so.
Oh, I did many bar mitzvahs in Livingston as a bar mitzvah and wedding DJ over there. Yeah, as you might imagine.
Yeah, I never had one.
Oh, there you go. Well, if to racially profile from your name that pops up, I'm assuming you went to a couple. You must have.
Yes, right? I went to many, and it was because that I saw my friends being dragged, kicking and screaming Hebrew school every Wednesday.
Yeah.
I didn't equate that with fun. So
yeah, I was a terror in my Hebrew school. I mean, I did things that are only funny in the confines of the book I'm writing, but certainly not funny in real life. Like, I remember being dragged out of Hebrew school because I was just a terribly behaved kid. I remember punching the president of the Hebrew school, or the principal, in the chest, and that was a woman principal. So yeah, I'd say her name, but I don't want this to get back to any of her relatives. But I feel terrible now.
They're probably all in Florida by now.
Yeah. My parents ended up in Florida. My parents both divorced, got remarried. They were always the tough New Yorkers. They were like, we're not those Jews who moved to Florida. That's not us. That's not us. And then sure enough, about like 6, 7, 8 years ago, there was a series of terrible winters in New York City. You might remember, where there were just blizzards upon blizzards and 10 feet of snow.
Yes.
And suddenly they're all living in Florida. They're like, yeah, we're those Jews now. Yeah, that's us.
The genetic switch flipped.
Oh yeah. It was around that same time that I moved to LA. So I just don't have to live like that anymore. I have no interest in going back to any sort of winter in any realistic sense. Like out here, I play tennis. I play tennis year round. In the winter, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't need to go back to
my favorite thing is to like stand on the beach in the middle of December.
Oh yeah.
Like right before Christmas and fire off photographs of me on the beach to all my family members in Indiana. Yeah. Just be like, man, winter's hard.
What part of Indiana are they in?
Most of them are living in New Palestine at this point.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Just outside of Indianapolis. So
sure. Yeah, there was I've spent a fair amount of time just in my music years touring all over the country and the world, but I spent a fair amount of time doing shows and radio appearances in Indiana. And I remember this great restaurant in Indianapolis that eventually, I think they ended up with like 10 little locations called Yats. Mm-hmm. It's Louisiana kind of food, and the menu's written on a chalkboard. They make what they make that day. They distribute it to their places. And that's what you eat. It's amazing. God, it's so good.
Like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, the food in Indiana is great, which explains the mass of most of my family members.
Hey, we were New York Jews. We got big. I had to fight that most of my life. But most of I think most of the male members of my family were either overweight or had heart disease by a very young age. So I had to. I think my dad had his first heart attack at, don't quote me, I think 38. So under 40.
Wow.
And so by the time I was 21, I kind of kicked a lot of, I was like, okay, I got to stop smoking, stop, like fried foods and drinking. And And that worked for a lot of years. And then I survived to my 40s. And I was like, why have I not drank all these years? And then I went back to it for a while, and then I didn't feel good. So I stopped again. Anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah. Totally. So what you said you were touring and stuff for music. When did you get into performing and being a musician? Like, it seems like music's kind of like your primary creative passion, looking at what you've got on your website.
Yeah, I would say only in terms of it's what I spent the largest portion of my life so far working on. I would tend to say that in general, I don't really feel like there's anything that I call primary besides just creation, like creativity in some form. If I have a friend who's working on a documentary, so for instance, at this point, 2 years ago, I always think it's last year, but then the pandemic happened. So 2 years ago, my friend who I produce films with called, and he was working on a documentary about one of my childhood idols, like this dancer, Boogaloo Shrimp, who was the guy who played Turbo in Breakin'. Those breakdancing movies. Anyway, as a kid, I was in theater and I was a dance kid. So we emulated all that stuff. And I loved this guy. He says working on this documentary and he needs an audio guy. So I'm like, great. So I got to work with one of my childhood idols, to work with Michael Chambers. And, that was just such a thrill to work on that movie. And it's available on Amazon now. So, I mean, they got some traction with it. Music is always a thing for me. I like to say that music, well, the arts in general and the music specifically became my life raft from a very young age. Like I was drowning as a troubled kid with, depression and a lot of stuff from a really not so great home life and, involved in drugs and alcohol at a very young age. And so from the time I was actually 7 is when I went to a Broadway show with my mom, and I saw Peter Pan on Broadway, and I saw Sandy Duncan was playing Peter Pan. And I remember sitting, we had good seats. I think she probably got the TKTS thing, which is half price Broadway tickets. Because we had really good seats. And it's not like we were rich or anything. So I remember sitting there, and if you've never seen a play like Peter Pan on Broadway or some massive theater, everybody's on flying around and everything. And I'm 7 years old. And this
magic.
It was magic. It was 1980, I guess. So I'm sitting there like, oh my God. And I remember I left there and I said at 7, I said, Mom, that's me. That's what I'm supposed to do. I didn't really know at 7 what that meant, but I knew that what it meant was something about the stage, something about creativity, something about performing. And it really became escape for me from my demons, which they never really go away. But as you get older, you find more fun ways to deal with them than suicide, to be honest. There's way better things to do than that. I mean, you can play piano, you can go on tour, you can.
There's such a finality to suicide.
I agree. It's a complete buzzkill. If you
the ultimate buzzkill, really.
wait. What, Stephen? What was that?
Some see it as a goal.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the best thing about surviving a certain amount of your life in the arts, and certainly with depression and some of these issues, is you do get a chance to reflect on it and joke. Like that's, to me, that's the most fun part of having survived this long, is that I can look back and, I can tell you stories about just some of the darkest moments of my life and just truly like about to end everything, in several places. But I can also joke about them and feel okay because life's pretty good right now,
Well, I think that makes ultimately getting through that dark stuff gets you to the antithesis of it, which is humor. Right. So a lot of the best comics in history have been some of the most depressive people, off the stage. They're able to turn that lens and focus it and turn that stuff into humor for other people and sometimes for themselves.
This is why I used to, when I lived in the South for about 9 years. I was in Nashville, ran a recording studio and toured out of there. And I got to meet a lot of white, conservative, Christian comics. Mm-hmm. They're not funny. Here's the problem.
Yeah. Noticed.
If you've like throughout history had it pretty good, there's nothing funny. I mean, you can make Bible jokes, I guess, which I saw a lot of Bible humor, which was, again, it wasn't lost on me. Jews tend to, we hear a lot about the Bible. We know about it, but
we wrote it.
We don't. Yeah, right. That's our thing. But that being said, like if you're just a white Christian, like what do you call it, the WASP kind of background, and you had everything always working out for your people going back centuries. It's very different than being black, where you were at least in this country and in others, for hundreds of years of slavery, plus the continued oppression that clearly never went anywhere, that's still there now,
right?
Or a Jew, which I like to say, we're the invisible black people. We were slaves for a long time, and in this day and age where we have so much disconnect in our country, it's really important as a white colored Jew. It's really important for me to stand up for people of color, because I know that when I'm silent, look, if I keep my mouth shut, I'm just accepted in the world, or certainly in America, as a white person. And but I learned the hard way that when you put yourself around the white power people, like in the South, I was not accepted as a white person there. Kind of like a Charlottesville rally, that I would not be welcome at that rally unless I kept my mouth shut about who I really was. So,
right. Yeah. The whole issue of race, especially this past year, has really come into focus for so many people. I spent so much time in the last year talking to white friends and trying to explain to them, my own experience of being half white and half Filipino, and
sure,
kind of this limbo that I exist in between being colored and not being colored. And
right.
Raised primarily by my father, who was as white as they come, and my mother, who, when I was small and my parents were together, had no interest in teaching me about being Filipino. So as I grew into an adult and started to show more of, like, I look Filipino or I look Hispanic, but I don't speak Spanish. I don't speak Tagalog, like I have very little knowledge of a lot of the culture. And so I don't fit in with any of the like Filipino cliques. So I don't get along with them. And then
you're not in a Filipino street gang.
No, and then there's no,
yeah.
And then there's, when I'm hanging out with my white friends, like sometimes I just don't feel in place with them either.
Sure. Yeah.
So, and then of course, I do get to experience the joys of systemic racism when I go through immigration checkpoints and get pulled over by cops in Texas, the whole bit.
I was on tour in 2014 in the Middle East, and it was a very different Middle East than exists right now. And by that, I mean, trust me, the last president we had, you'll never hear me say anything nice about them. But that being said, there was one area in which the conversation in the world was moved forward during that time, and that was the Middle East. And I saw that because I was in 7 or 8 different Middle Eastern countries and 2 or 3 African countries on tour. It was for the troops, so it was like all these bases in the Gulf and Africa. And first of all, that experience was amazing. Being with the troops in the middle of the desert while they haven't seen anyone from home, and you're entertaining them, hanging out with them. But at 3 separate borders, all these wonder-bred white folks from Texas and Alabama who were on tour with me, except me. I was the only non-that, they all went through, no problem. And I specifically remember Kuwait, which is odd because my passport's from America, and technically without America, Kuwait might not exist right now.
Right.
But that being said, I was harassed at 3 different borders, but the Kuwaiti one was bad. The guy looks at my passport and then he looks at me like you ever see Larry David, like giving the squint in Curb Your Enthusiasm, like he's giving the eye. This guy's giving me the Larry David eye, which is the king of our irony. And he's looking at me, he goes, you are Jew. I'm like, see, now I was already told that I was going to countries where Jews weren't allowed. I was already told that, but this was, we were for the Department of Defense, American tour, this kind of thing.
Right.
So I was told there would be no problems. So he's like, you are Jew. So I'm like, no, I'm not Jew. He goes, you are Jew. And he starts like getting on the phone, trying to call his supervisors. We have a Jew trying to get into the country. Then he goes, you have been to Israel, which I had been there 3 times on tour in the last 5 years. So I was like,
right.
Oh God. So I'm like, no, I haven't been to Israel. So then he takes me, sits me down, takes my passport and has this ultraviolet lamp thing. He's looking at each page carefully under this light because he's looking for any evidence of a stamp from Israel.
Right.
Because if a Jew who has been to Israel is trying to get into their country, they're a spy and they could be imprisoned immediately.
Wow.
So it's like, the world is a wacky place and we're not a loved people. Although when I was doing comedy a lot more before the pandemic, and certainly in the South, I did this whole spiel about how everyone hates the Jews, but white supremacists, they do. But then you ask them about Seinfeld, be like, oh man, he's funny. We love Seinfeld.
There's always the exceptions to every learned behavior, right?
Right. They love us when we make them laugh, but they also want to kill us. It's very strange.
Yeah. So when did you start moving into comedy? Like how did you get into that? So
you might have noticed, I believe I mentioned that I was a bar mitzvah DJ and a wedding DJ for many years. At this point, it's an embarrassing high number of years at this point, mostly because I think the pandemic year added 10 years. So there you go. Let's go with that.
Blame everything on the pandemic.
Right. But I had been a bar mitzvah DJ since the summer of 1992. And what happened was I was living in the South and I was doing very well in music in the South, whether it was country, pop, rock. I was working with my idols. It was mind blowing to me that I had the unbelievable fortune to be in this situation, have a recording studio on Music Row, to be touring the world in all these countries I never knew I would get to see in my life. It was truly a blessing. It really, to use the Southern vernacular, it really was a blessing. I was so lucky. So that being said, I was also living there during the Obama years, and the rise of the next guy started to come in. And all these people who hated the Obama years were really starting to organize. A lot more violence, a lot more guns around, a lot more hate openly, people getting run off the road if they had an Obama sticker on the car, people getting death threats. I myself had a gun pulled on me in my own studio. I got death threats because I was a Jew. It was a mess. And granted, that could happen anywhere, but they do it really well in the South. That's like the specialty. So at the time I started, oh my God, my boxer is breathing on me, which is fine, but I don't want her to do that for the interview. Okay, there she goes. Okay, so at the time, I just want to make one thing clear. I never planned to go into comedy. My comedy was always on the mic as the bar mitzvah DJ or in between sets, in between songs when I was playing. So I had no intention. Yeah, I had no intention of doing stand-up because what a miserable thing that is. It's really, it's horrible. It's truly like going on stage naked and letting the audience just beat you in the nads just for no reason. Like
normally I'd pay extra for that, but
exactly. Like why would anyone want that life? It's misery. So, oops, I got out of focus. Let's see if it catches me. There we go. Anyway, that being said, so I'm doing this bar mitzvah life, the bar mitzvah gig that's bought me homes. It's a really sweet deal. I started in New York, done it all up and down the Eastern Seaboard, then Nashville, where I serviced every Jew I could find for miles because there weren't many. And then I started to advertise in Los Angeles Craigslist. So what happened was in the 2016 in February, I get a message from someone, and it was really strange because they'd seen the ad in Craigslist, but they didn't want to tell me kind of who they were or who they were working for or whatever. So it was very strange. So I get this call. It's like, hey, we saw your ad. Can you send us any links to your stuff? I send them a link to the YouTube videos of me doing wacky bar mitzvah stuff. Get a call back. Hey, listen, you're great. We would love to have you. Are you available to DJ this bar mitzvah we're doing? I'm like, sure. What's the date? Let me check my calendar. They said, well, it's Saturday. I'm like, Saturday? Which Saturday? They're like, this Saturday coming up. Now, I have no idea where they're calling from. I'm not putting any of this together yet. So I'm like, okay, great. So I'll look into this. I'm available. And I said, well, listen, last minute bar mitzvah, usually my rates are blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, the money won't be a problem, even though they did talk me down quite a bit, but whatever, that's Hollywood for you. So I agreed to do it. And I said, okay, well, what part of town are you in? Where is the bar mitzvah? Where do I have to go? Is it a lot of travel? They're like, oh, it's in Silver Lake. So in my mind, I have no clue what the hell Silver Lake is because I'm living in Nashville. So I'm like, Silver Lake, is that near Hendersonville? In my mind. So I get on Google Maps. Like Google Maps, when you find something far away, all of a sudden it goes woo, like that. Yeah. So I put in Silver Lake while I'm on the phone with her. Her name was Joni. And on the phone with her, I'm like, oh, yeah, that should be no problem. And I put in Silver Lake, it goes, whoo, and it's in the middle of Los Angeles. I'm like, shit, this worked. This crazy lie worked. People think that I'm in Los Angeles. And then over the next day, I get a flight on Southwest, which, by the way, got canceled because of snow. So I was freaking out because by the second day, she starts sending the info over, and I see she's from Adult Swim. I was like, oh, Adult Swim. And then she's like, well, I'm having trouble hearing you. Siri did a cameo for no reason.
Yeah, mine does that too.
Siri on my watch.
Yeah.
Like I got the watch for exercise, and now Siri's listening to my stories. Wow. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do that thing where you put her in a timeout. There we go. She's in theater mode now. Yeah. Anyway, so I get the call. I know I have to get to LA by Saturday. This is a Tuesday. So on Wednesday, I book the flight for Thursday. Great. Then I get to the airport on Thursday for the flight. Flight is canceled. I have to make the next flight on the only flight going out. It was Friday. It was going to get in close to midnight at LAX, which my gig is Saturday. And by this point, I know it's a network. I know it's for Adult Swim. But now she finally tells me, oh, it's just, it's a birthday party for a comedian. I'm like, okay, anybody I heard of? Or she's like, Eric Andre? I'm like, oh, Eric Andre. Okay. And so I look him up because right off the bat, I didn't get it. And then I look him up. I'm like, oh, Eric Andre. I've seen this guy. I've seen him on, I think at the time, last thing I saw him do was a political correspondent thing for Comedy Central, where he went to whether it was Republican or Democratic National Convention and covered it for them, which was hysterical. And then I watched some of his show, which I don't know if you've ever seen his show, but it's insane. I mean, it was terrifying. So what happened was the only reason I got this gig, they had some super famous like club DJ from LA who they hired. Once he found out it was for the Eric Andre show, he passed on the gig because he was too cool to be like somebody's punchline or something. Whereas I'm like, no, that's right up my alley. To be a goof, that's what I do. So anyway, so the reason the original question that I've been long-winded about is, how did I even get into comedy? It's Eric Andre's fault. So he hired me. They liked my videos. He hired me for his bar mitzvah. I get to this place in Silver Lake, hadn't slept, whatever. I meet Eric. At the time, he's dating Rosario Dawson. So before I meet Eric, Rosario Dawson shows up and she's walking around aimlessly. And I'm like, I'm at a party where it's a small invite list, probably 200 people total. And every single person is every comedian and every actor I've ever loved on every single network comedy on HBO, Showtime, plus Rosario Dawson shows up. At that point, I don't know, my bravado, I walked straight up to her because she looked lost. I said, hey, who are you looking for? I'll help. She goes, have you seen Eric? I said, yes, come with me. So I'm thinking, hey, I'm leading Rosario Dawson around a party. Look at me. And then I bring her to Eric and they hug and start making out. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, hey, that's cool. Cause at the time they're together, but I don't know any of this. Anyway, I talked to Eric where I knew that from his show, I knew he's going to be naked at part of this party. So I asked him, what do you want me to wear? I got my tux and this and that. He goes, well, it's going to be crazy. Russell, I need you to go all the way with this whole Bar Mitzvah DJ thing. I'm like, Eric, you got the right guy. I'm going to go all the way with the Bar Mitzvah DJ thing. And it was insane. The compromise was he was going to be naked. So I just went shirtless with the tux jacket. And there's videos of this on YouTube, and of course, Adult Swim, I guess, from that day. But it was insane. If you've ever been to a bar mitzvah, Stephen, I know you have. Yes. we got Rosario Dawson up in the chair doing the hora. I mean, it was, everyone was nuts, and everyone was my comedy heroes in the audience. And me and Eric are working off each other, and everyone's watching this. So they just figure, we don't know this guy. He's obviously a comedian who works with Eric. That's how I was accepted.
That's great.
Because of course I'm comfortable. I would have been comfortable anyway, but I was comfortable certainly in the scenario of being the bar mitzvah DJ guy.
Right.
And I'm dancing on the bar. I got no shirt on. People are nuts. At one point they did Eric was going to do a mock circumcision. So he got the visual effects guys to help him out. He made a foreskin out of putty, and then he had blood packets that when they did it, they had a rabbi. They cut it, and the foreskin flew into the crowd, and blood spurt everywhere. It was amazing. And of course, right before it, I'm like, are you guys ready? We're going to cut off his fucking foreskin. It was a good time. But all of that to say, after that happened,
who caught it?
I wasn't even right. I don't remember that, but
you don't want to remember that.
No, I don't. But after that, about 2 months later, I just like, wow, LA's great. That was my first LA gig. That's amazing. I moved to LA and I went out to of course, I had a lot of industry friends here already for many years. So I'd go out to events and I kept getting stopped from people in comedy of all levels and be like, hey man, didn't you play the DJ at Eric Andre's Bar Mitzvah for Adult Swim?
Didn't you play the DJ?
Right. And I'm like, yes, I did. Dude, you killed it, man. You were hilarious. Listen, you got to do my show at the Comedy Store, blah, blah, blah. So I ended up getting thrown into gigs that I had no business doing because I had no experience. But being a lifelong performer and being very comfortable on stage in front of any number of people, I very foolishly said yes. And I went out and I did these shows. And so even when I bombed, I was totally comfortable with that. Right. Because it was no big deal. It was just
whatever.
Okay.
I'm out of my element anyway. So
yeah, no big deal.
And then smart enough to take advantage of the situation. And run with it.
That's, to be honest, that's been the story of my life. I mean, I've had many opportunities throughout my life where any number of my friends or maybe just normal people, regular people would just have an experience. One very brief one I can think of is I got the chance to play with Martina McBride. She's a, big country singer and everything, super respected throughout the industry. And I knew her because I had worked at her recording studio a couple of years earlier, and they needed someone. They wanted somebody younger next to her on stage for this video she was filming for a new single. So I got the call, I got to do the gig, and any other person in history that I know, like of my friends, would have been like, just had this great story of that one time they got to play with Martina McBride. But me, I was like, well, I have to, like, opportunities don't grow on trees, and I have to do something with this. And I got to know her band really well, and we all became friends. And then after that, I produced probably like 10 to 15 records in Nashville where I used her touring band as the studio band for those albums. And they were incredible. It was just really wonderful to get to work with them. So
that's fantastic. Speaking of Nashville, I have to ask this question because it's one of my closest friends, like one of her favorite shows. But your website says you were seen on the hit ABC TV series Nashville.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that experience just a little bit so that when my friend listens to this episode, she can thank me for doing it?
Right. Fair enough. So, I mean, to be fair, if you lived in Nashville during the years that I was living there and you weren't in the show Nashville, it would be very strange. Like almost everyone.
It's like being an actor in New York and not ending up on Law and Order.
Right. I was corpse number 3. Yeah. I mean, right. You really needed, or they really needed for their production, so many people for each episode. And they really leaned heavily on the music community because of the nature of the show and because of the nature of Nashville. So I think a couple of times I played a studio engineer. Wasn't a big deal, but when you're talking about things you've done, I mean, it goes up there. You just say,
right.
I mean,
not everybody's been on a national network television show. So,
right. I mean, but I've also done a commercial for a lawyer in South Carolina. I mean, that's good stuff. I got to say, I don't even remember the name. This guy was known as the Hammer. And I was just like, let the power of the hammer. Blah, it's so crazy. It's on YouTube somewhere.
Advertising.
Yeah.
So let's dovetail for the end of this interview a little bit. So looking at your website, you're also a councilman. When did politics become part of this? Because that seems like a bit of a right turn from where you were going.
Well, so I should say that in general, I don't like politics. And if I wasn't afraid of assassination, maybe I would consider like higher levels of politics. I really don't like much about politics, but I have a long history of fighting for equal rights, for marginalized groups, and for the homeless, for mental illness. So it really, I would say it'd be accidental, but it happened because I'm me. Like, because when I got to LA, just like when I got to Nashville, and when I got to Nashville, I tried this as well, and it did not work well because I do not fit into the mold that they would like people to be in Nashville. Right. So I actually ran up against a lot of resistance there. But in Los Angeles, obviously a very left-leaning place, some of the issues that I'm very passionate about just led me to getting involved in my local. So I live in North Hollywood. So we have the NoHo Neighborhood Council, which is that neighborhood council system is all part of Los Angeles main city council, but we are pooped on more and paid nothing. So there you go. That's which is fine. That's fine. I mean, it's a volunteer position, but you have to be elected and that kind of thing. So I got involved because I saw signs in the neighborhood about the neighborhood council, and I looked it up. I said, I wonder what this is. And wow, I'm looking. I don't know what happened. I feel like there's been a nuclear blast. Now I'm super overexposed.
Bit of sunlight coming in on you. It's fine. This is an audio only episode anyway. We're just on video so we can interact.
I was going to say, I look so pretty. And there's no video. You guys should look at this. Come on. Anyway, whatever.
It's not video. It's not video, and I still have the still picture of me. So
yeah. All right. So
problems there.
Yeah. So I basically, if you work in the arts or live in the arts for a long portion of your life, you're at one point or many points going to be wooed by a free meal, and when I learned that these city council meetings were catered, I was like, well, I got to check this out, get to know what's happening in my community immediately, but also, get dinner. So I said, okay. So I started going to the meetings, and then I started raising my hand and speaking on, topics that were being discussed, because you can always share if you're from the public, this and that. And then the president of our council, who's still the president, this guy, Paul Storiali, and he actually runs a lot of the theaters in North Hollywood. He's kind of like a mafia boss, but in the best way. Benevolent.
Strictly the best sense.
Yeah. He's the best Don we could have. He runs a lot of the theaters and keeps the arts alive in the NoHo Arts District. He's really a wonderful human being. So he became a friend, and he started saying to me off to the side after the meetings, he goes, we have elections coming up. You should really run. I'm like, run? What do you mean? I'm not going to be elected, a politician. Who's going to vote for me? Whatever. And I ended up running because he really prodded me to do it. And this was at a time when people could show up and vote. So the elections coming up this year are going to be very different. But I actually won in a landslide against 4 people, 2 of which were incumbents who had been on the board. So I was like, there's no way. I'm not going to say it was like the last president, who definitely shouldn't have won and didn't think he was going to win. But I was pretty sure there was no way I was going to get elected. And then I won in a landslide. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm on the council. So and I've gotten involved in a lot of stuff in the community. Like I said, initiatives for the homeless. We've done so much, or gotten a lot done in the last couple of years. Even during the pandemic, we just started opening these tiny home communities for the homeless. Okay.
That's awesome.
We have, there's 2 of the communities. One of them has, I think, 50 homes, and another one has 75. That one's being finished, but they're right near the park. So it's a place where we're trying to provide more resources for people. Each of these sites has 3 meals a day available. Everyone gets their own little house, and there's medical on staff as well. So I mean, it's really been a wonderful initiative. It's not that I personally am responsible for it, but my point is I've been available to these initiatives and really been able to work on them with the committees, like the Committee for the Homeless, or right. I was involved with the Outreach Committee and that kind of thing. So
well, that's lovely.
So it was just an extension of working on issues that were important to me as a human being anyway. And that's how it happened. It was not like, oh, I want to be mayor or something, because that looks like a well-paid but thankless position in most places.
The higher up you go, the more you're paid, the more you're hated, though. So it's like it's an inverse thing. So
and plus, I can't imagine all the stuff they would dig up from my social media over the years.
Danger, Will Robinson.
Right.
You also got yourself ordained.
Yes. So again, that it sort of speaks to what we were just saying about issues that were important to me. On January 26, 2015, I became ordained as a secular minister to marry people. I felt strongly about it for 2 reasons. Number one, for anyone who doesn't remember, June 26, 2015 is the date that same-sex marriage became law of the land in the Supreme Court. It was under Obama and Biden, and they had pushed it. And I think it was just history. It was time. My aunt is gay. She's been with her partner over 30 years. And I remember growing up hearing these horrific stories of when they were in different states, and one was in the hospital and the other one wasn't allowed to visit because they weren't family. It's just the worst kind of discrimination and dehumanizing crap. So I always felt strongly about that. And since I was living in the Deep South, which no matter what anyone says, by the way, Nashville is the Deep South. It's not a blue. Everyone's like, oh, it's a blue island in the sea of red. I'm like, no, it's purple at best. It's really, it's pretty conservative. So, I saw with my own eyes, couples, once it was legal for them to get married, getting turned away from tons of wedding officiants forget about the church, because churches have that special religious freedom BS stuff. They can say, oh, well, we don't, and that's fine. It's like, I wouldn't want to be a member of a group who wouldn't have me, that kind of thing. Right. So fine, they're allowed to do what they want. But if you put yourself out there as a wedding officiant and a couple calls you to get married and it's their legal right to get married, you say, oh, well, it goes against my religious blah, blah, blah. It was horrible. So I got to marry. The beginning of my marrying couples was mostly interracial couples who still got discriminated against, and same-sex couples. And I did a lot of them. And some of them came from far out of state. Like there's two men who were together for decades who drove up from somewhere in the middle of Alabama, and they got turned down by everyone there and everyone else in Tennessee. But I was the first person who said, yeah, of course, wow. Come on up. And of course, when I brought their marriage certificate into the city, in Davidson County, I of course got tons of dirty looks. Like they didn't want to process it. Yeah. Right. I'm like, hey, listen, this is the law. I married these people. I'm an officiant. And by the way, just to circle back on this whole thing about being ordained, since then, Tennessee passed a terrible law that invalidates all ordinations that are not connected to I think a Christian church. It has to be a specific ordination. So it's, wow. Yeah. So now if I went back, somebody asked me to marry them now, I would not be legally able to in Tennessee. Anywhere else in the country, fine. But Tennessee, whatever.
So working the loopholes the best they can to.
Yep. Just like North Carolina, Texas, and Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi.
Jim Crow of a different style.
Yeah.
Wow. That's not right.
No, it's horrific. And, when I had girlfriends, when I was in the South, I had a Korean girlfriend at one point. We got, again, it's discrimination that you can handle, but it's still ridiculous. I remember going to Costco in Nashville. And again, this is in Nashville, not out in the sticks. And, they have the little women who are working the samples. Remember we used to have samples at Costco back in the day? God, I miss that. I was so fat and happy with my Costco meals every day. Hey, I got this Costco card. I'm eating. I remember one of the samples was this, it was like a teriyaki noodle and vegetable thing. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I walked up to the sample and I was with my girlfriend at the time, who's Korean. And I said, oh, what is this one? And she does not, it was my girlfriend who asked what's in it. She wouldn't look at my girlfriend. She looks at me very disapprovingly and says, she goes, oh, it's a stir fry. You know what that is, honey, don't you? So really, wow. I remember I was out with, I was dating, one of my girlfriends was Black, and we had issues in restaurants and, getting seated, and watched all kinds of just, white couples be seated while we're waiting. And, it's.
Well, it's also probably really difficult to find a decent bagel in Tennessee.
Well, yeah, hey, listen, LA is not the best either, but at least, some chains moved here. And I got to say, pizza in LA has just grown considerably since I've been here just over the last 4 years. So many great pizza places.
Yeah. There's one near me that is got my business for life.
Pizza or bagel?
Pizza.
Oh yeah. Gotcha.
And they are transplants from Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So they have my business for life.
Yeah, we were talking about pizza and bagels during Passover. My mom would be, hey, you know what I'm going to do? Oh, you know what? No one can see this. Never mind. I was going to pick up my box of Holy Land matzahs I got at Trader Joe's. So I'd feel like, Let me take out my Star of David, feel better. Anyway. But
I love that you're wearing both a chain and a Star of David.
Yeah, it's a funny story. I've wanted this particular chain for so long. I could never afford it. And then, I got a little older and, after 10 years of wanting this, it's like a 8mm thick sterling silver. It's really nice. They cost like $1,500 because it's really heavy and I could never afford it. But then, I don't know, there was some kind of crazy sale at one of those, it was like off some like Saks off Fifth or whatever. And it was 70% off and then an additional 25% off. So I ended up I'm like, listen, I'm an adult. I've wanted this necklace forever. I'm just going to get it. And I think it ended up costing me like $220. It's like, I'm happy. But the other one, so the Star I got in Jerusalem on my first tour there, and I never know which to wear. So I'd keep them both. I don't know. What are you going to do? I'm the Jewish Mr.
I think that's
T.
great.
Lots of chains.
There you go.
I pity the fool.
Russell, it's been wonderful getting to know you and chatting with you. Where can people follow you and hit you up if they're interested in hiring you for stuff?
Sure.
What's all the deets for getting a hold of you?
The easiest thing is just to know the spelling of my name, because everywhere, as long as you know I'm not the president of a division of ESPN, then you'll know that the Russell Wolff is the right one. The bald guy with the beard. So it's Russell with 2 S's, 2 L's, and Wolff with 2 F's. So as long as you remember 2 S's, 2 L's, 2 F's, you're going to remember. You can find me like that on Instagram, I could be like my OnlyFans. You can follow my OnlyFans. You want to watch me dance in a tutu for you? Absolutely. Just subscribe monthly. Twitter, of course, the regular website also uses that spelling. I'm all over the web with that spelling. And whether it's my old albums that I put out as an artist are still there. Albums that I produce for other artists are up there. And of course, right now I'm working on 2 documentaries and a book that may or may not, the book's almost done. I mean, the book is, I have about 78,000 words, which for a kid who could barely read, I was pretty impressed with. But I did end up with a Harvard degree. So it was like I snuck in there, so the book's almost done, and that may turn into a screenplay. But in the meantime, just going for the book right now, because I think, from what I hear, people are reading again because we have all kinds of time.
Right. People are tired of Netflix. I've been all through Netflix. I don't know what to do.
I got to the end of Netflix. Remember when that was a joke? I made it to the end of the internet. You could never do that now. But 20 years ago, people talked about getting to the end of the internet. I feel like that's our Netflix now. In the pandemic, you can get to the end of Netflix.
Thank God Disney Plus came up and now HBO Max.
Right.
They just keep extending the bottom of the well, which is wonderful. I
made, because I am a Costco addict aficionado, I made a crazy purchase at the beginning of the pandemic that I was mocked endlessly for by my friends. I bought, and this was something I promised myself for years, I bought an 85-inch Sony TV with Dolby Atmos surround sound and everything. People were like, you're an idiot. What are you going to do with that? Your place is too small. You don't need that, blah, blah, blah. And then a month later, the pandemic comes and everything's shut for now.
Theaters all shut down and you're like, I'm good.
Yeah, I'm loving this. When sports was on, I'm watching that. Every movie that's come out, I'm watching on that. It's probably the best purchase I think I've ever made in my life. And I've bought a house. This is way better than a house.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Russell. I appreciate you giving us the time and letting us get to know you a little bit today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a real pleasure. And we were talking about, we're both, dealing with vaccines and stuff and getting them. I was so tired yesterday, but I had a lot of energy this morning. So I'm really glad. I'm grateful. Yeah. Grateful to be with you guys today.
Yeah. I'm sorry Whitney missed it.
Getting my first one in 3 weeks.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching Intellectual Podcast with your ears.